The podcast you are about to listen to is one of the many podcasts that is part of the College Huddle, the largest fan-led college sports podcast community on the internet. Fan-made, fan-driven, and fan-fueled. The College Huddle.
Whoa, he has trouble with the snap, and the ball is free.
Okay, next question.
I'm a horse football coach right now.
You know, it got shoved up, it got shoved, right?
Oh, the sound of that fight song never gets old. What's up, Spartans fans, and hopefully a good amount of Iowa Hawkeye fans. We're here with another episode of the Spartan Savants podcast, joined by the usual Spartan Savants crew and some special guests this week. We have Tori and Joel from the 12 Saturdays podcast. In my opinion, the best Iowa podcast out there. You can find they're the Iowa representative for the College Huddle. Joel, Tori, great to have you guys. We're looking forward to this great matchup. Two good teams always seem to have good games, but it's good to have you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Willie and Nikki and Trava. We're excited to be here. I had a quick question though. Was that very first clip on your intro? Was that the game where Michigan screwed up the snap and then ended up losing?
Yeah.
Oh my God! I will tell you, I was coming back from an away game at Northwestern, and my buddy and I were listening to that, and we were just dying because is it Matt Millen? Is that the Michigan radio announcer? Or who's the older guy?
Jim Branch.
All I know is like one of them was like literally like on the verge of tears.
It's
and
Dan
we
Deere.
were laughing our asses off. It was such a beautiful thing. So yeah, thanks for dredging up that memory for me. So
of course, yeah.
My partner is Joel Crossauer. Joel, say hi.
Hi.
Well, it's great to have you both. We're really looking forward to talking about getting to know a little bit more about Iowa, a team that I truly, if I'm being totally honest, have not watched a ton of. But there's some Michigan ties to Iowa, the state of Michigan as a whole. Obviously, Cade McNamara, the quarterback. They brought in Tim Lester as the OC, former head coach of Western Michigan. So we'll get into some of that. But before we dive into all the nuances and storylines, I want to get an idea from you, Tori and Joel. I think a 30,000-foot view, State of the Union, Iowa football, how you're feeling heading into this game, where the heads are at, how you feel about the team's performance so far, and all things along those lines.
Field this first one, Joel.
You want me to field it?
Yeah, sure. I want to.
So first off, the biggest connection is Iowa's defense coordinator Phil Parker is a Michigan State grad,
right,
and is still bitter that he was not on the field on the Chuck Long naked bootleg to beat the Spartans back in the 80s. And Phil claims that he knew it was coming, and his position coach was an idiot and didn't have him on the field. That position coach was Nick Saban, and so that's always a fun story to hear Phil tell. No, the State of the Union for Iowa football is they've got two losses, one pretty bad loss to Ohio State a few weeks ago, and a 1-point loss to Iowa State. Both teams ranked in the top 10, so there's a lot of reason for optimism as Hawkeyes, but for some reason, because of the painful offense of the last couple of years, Iowa fans have a hard time enjoying things these days. And I think that the fan base, for the most part, is excited for what this team can do, but they still can't get over what could have been with that tough loss against the Cyclones. So I think from a standpoint of the fan base, I think it's split down the middle. I think there's a lot of people who think there's a lot ahead of the Hawkeyes, and then there's just some miserable saps who can't get out of the doghouse for what happened a couple weeks ago and a month ago. But maybe that's just my circle of abysmal, depressed individual story. I don't know what your world and the more older can appreciate what Iowa is because they lost so much in your childhood.
Well, and stepping back even farther, maybe even than 10,000 feet, I think what has been vexing and so frustrating as an Iowa fan is that Iowa has really lived in this good but not great space for most of the Ferentz era. I mean, we get tantalizingly close, right? 2002, oh my God, we're going to go to the Rose Bowl, but then it's a weird situation. We end up in the Orange Bowl. We play USC, and they probably were a national championship level squad, so we lose that game. 2009, oh my God, we take Ohio State to overtime. All we have to do is beat them in the shoe with our backup quarterback, and we, again, go to the college football playoff, and they fall short. These guys know exactly what happened in 2015. Michigan, we had fourth down play. We go to the college football playoffs. Nope. Michigan State is the one that puts it in. We've gone to 2 Big Ten championship games and got blown out at them. And so it just, I guess it feels a lot like Groundhog, and it makes you feel a little like, yeah, we're a little entitled, but we haven't got over that final hump. And then the Iowa State game, I know you guys said you didn't watch it much. That was a true freshman field goal kicker in his first road game in a hostile atmosphere from 54 yards. I never thought it was going to go in. And if Iowa right now is sitting at 5-1 instead of 4-2, and their only losses to a really good Ohio State team, we're all still thinking about college football playoffs. Now that door is mostly shut unless Iowa wins out. Then they might have, but even if they win out, there's no guarantee. So I think the level of frustration is, we know the landscape of college football is changing. And we know Iowa, being a smaller school, doesn't have as deep of pockets as some, kind of punches above its weight. This season was one of our last really good chances, I think, to sneak into that with the expanded playoffs. And now it kind of feels like that's mostly out the door. And so, yeah, like you tell most programs, oh, you're going to win 10 games for a third season in a row. They're very excited. But for Iowa, it's kind of like, well, we've kind of been right there, but we just can't get over it. So frustrating, but we still think we have a good team.
Yeah, and that's tough. Trust me when I tell you, if you told me and Travis and Nick that we were winning 10 games a year, 3 or 4 years in a row, we would be pretty happy. But I can certainly understand the level of frustration. Trav, before I let you chime in, I think there's a point or a question I'd like to ask, given what I'm hearing. Do you guys, Tori and Joel, do you guys feel any, I don't know the right word, ill will or blame on Ferentz for sticking around so long, or is he someone you trust the keys to, and hopefully you get over that hump?
I love the man. I mean, he's the dean of college football coaches. He's genuine. He does things primarily the right way. And so it's hard to get mad at him. It can be, there is definitely some, what they call Ferentz fatigue in the fan base, because a lot of times things kind of look the same. It's going to be strong defense, not pretty offense most of the time, although I think Joel will push back on that, because Tim Lester actually is he's the guy I gave the game ball to for the 40-16 win last week, even though Iowa had a little hiccup and the passing game was still kind of meh. At least they look threatening now. So I don't personally have Ferentz fatigue, but I kind of understand why people do. I mean, again, just not quite getting over that hump can make people maybe not appreciate what they have. My thing is, though, I look at Nebraska, I look at Wisconsin, I look at other teams around. Iowa is a bad coaching hire away from being Illinois or being Minnesota or, God forbid, being Purdue. And that terrifies the crap out of me. And so I try not to let the frustration of not being exactly where I wish they would be cloud how much good work the guy's done.
I thought you were about to say, God forbid, Michigan State, and I was about to get really upset.
But you can throw Michigan State in that category, though, post Mark D'Antonio. I mean,
I hate Mark D'Antonio with a passion.
Come on now.
And I've had some run-ins.
Wrong show for that. Yeah,
I know. I've had a cup of coffee as a college football coach, and I know some people who had no Mark well from his Ohio State days, and I'm just not. And the Colin Sandeman, when he was knocked out on the field with D'Antonio yelling over him. I coached against Colin in high school and know Colin well, and so I'm it's totally biased on my part. So I get it. But I think the Ferentz fatigue question is, it's kind of like, I hate this. This is boring. It's the same thing year in, year out. But then you look at it, think of it like your 401k, and then you look at your statement. It's like, oh, well, I got a 10% return this year. This is I'm going to be able to retire someday because we're performing pretty well. Now, I didn't hit the crypto boom, or I didn't buy the GameStop. I didn't stock, and have the huge output there. But at the end of the day, Ken O'Keefe, the longtime Iowa offensive coordinator, used to always tell the guys, never turn down a profit. Well, that's kind of the way we are with Kirk Ferentz. It's, right now we're profitable as a fan base and as a team. And I think the people who are a little bit more mature in their approach get that, and they can live with, the occasional 10-9 football game, or having to forbid another 6-4 game like they had against Penn State in the mid 2000s. But I also love the guy. You listened to an interview with Jamari Harris, the star corner for the Hawkeyes this past weekend, talking about how he's made him a man in the 6 years that he's been in the program and how it started out rocky. Those are the stories that we always hear. And, for me, that erases any frustration I have because he didn't call a timeout with 1:30 left in the first half to try to score a touchdown, and they just kind of rode the clock into the locker room. Those are the things that I think drive Iowa fans bonkers. But at the end of the day, those decisions usually don't bite him in the ass. When they do, it seems like people remember them forever. But it's like Tori said, we don't want to end up like in the Bill Callahan, Mike Riley years of Nebraska football, because, they fired Bo Pelini. All he did was win 9 games a year, 10 games a year, and, take them to relevant bowl games and compete for the Big Ten West title at the time. So it's going to be different. We'll see how it changes now that this conference has expanded, because there is no more Big Ten West. And while the Big Ten West, I think is always stronger than you idiots in the East gave us credit for. I'm kidding. I'm not calling you guys idiots. I'm just having some fun.
Oh, we are.
To better evaluate. Yeah. The lack of the Big Ten West will allow us to evaluate.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly get that.
I'm long-winded and with a bad internet connection.
That's all right. That's all right. No, I think both of you make great points. I mean, we've seen it not just in football, but Villanova basketball. Jay Wright retires. You think that it's just a factory. They hire someone. They've struggled to get in the tournament the past couple of years. And I think in our own home, we worry about that happening when Tom Izzo is gone. There certainly Izzo fatigue in our fan base as well. So both you guys well taken points on that. It's certainly a fear, and I've always thought highly of Kirk Ferentz and what he does at Iowa.
You guys are just going to hand the reins to Dane Fife and have the second most punchable face in the Big Ten as the head coach.
Man, that's a slap about Izzo and Mark D'Antonio this episode. Yeah, don't keep my eye on you, Joel. Trev, you want to go ahead?
6'2", 325.
All right, maybe not.
Okay. One of the things that Ferentz was getting a lot of flack for, obviously, was keeping his son around so long and when their offense wasn't doing anything. So I'm going to ask the question that everybody's thinking about. What has Tim Lester done since he's come in there to kind of steer things a little better, and how has things changed? I mean, you guys are averaging, by statistically scoring twice as much per game. So what's going on there?
Fan perspective, and I'll turn it over to Joel for the technical aspect, because he's the coach.
That's perfect.
From a fan perspective, for the entire Brian Ferentz tenure, it looked like Iowa it was so hard. Everything was so hard. Like a first down was hard. Completing a pass is hard. And, I don't know exactly why, but it almost kind of sometimes seemed like he was just so stubborn. Like, I want to do things exactly this way. I want to do it in a pro style. And so, it just didn't look right. They never looked like a threat. Now with Lester, you're seeing like he's got guys moving before the ball. He's throwing slants like across the middle. He's attacking in different. So Hayden Fry I'm the old guy, right? Okay. So I'm 50 something here. And so I grew up watching Hayden Fry Iowa teams, and he had a phrase called scratch where it itches on offense. And that is see what the opponent is doing, find out where you can exploit it, and then see if it starts to work in the game, and then just go to that. And I feel like Tim Lester has really done that. He's making adjustments. He's on the fly. He's figuring out, where I feel like Brian was more like, by God, this is how we're going to do this. We spent all week on this game plan. And then even when it failed spectacularly, it was just pounding your head against a brick wall, and nothing can frustrate people more than that. So that's sort of my fan perspective. I'll let Joel talk about the actual, coaching.
Yeah, I'm a big Brian Ferentz fan, and that's gotten people to not like me sometimes in the conversation. The architect of the Ohio State bludgeoning a few years ago, but I think the biggest thing is it was time for Brian to go. But what Tim Lester brings that I didn't realize he brought was really a subtlety in the motion and pre-snap motion that really forces defenses to commit to their look. And it's the same thing that Matt LaFleur does with the Packers. It's the same thing that Mike Shanahan did, and the whole Shanahan tree.
Right.
And, the LaFleurs and Lester go all the way back to Western Michigan. And even I think Tim coached one of the LaFleur boys at a small college in Illinois. So there's a lot of connection there, connective tissue to that West Coast derivative offense and the zone blocking. I mean, you're seeing Caleb Johnson have Terrell Davis type numbers this year, and you're seeing that outside zone really, really be effective. And it's not the old stretch zone that Iowa really used to run a lot with the Ferentz. It's attacking that 6 hole and the 7 hole on the left side. And the tight ends are really effective in the running game. So it's been an evolution without completely changing face. Like we've seen Wisconsin go to the air raid. Iowa has changed their offense without changing the personnel that they already had on campus. And it's only continuing to grow. I mean, the 40 points they scored against Washington were real 40 points. Like it was a consistent attack on offense. It wasn't just here's a pick six here, a punt return here. So the Lester offense is really, really giving me a lot of hope. And a lot of it stems from the offensive line development too.
Yeah, it does certainly look like a new offense. I had a double take last week. I mean, 40 points against Illinois State is one thing. I had a double take when I saw 40 points against Washington.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty big that they start building on what they have instead of doing the Wisconsin and what Pickle's doing and not working out over there.
Yeah. Yeah, no question.
And in my opinion, it takes a bigger leap when they finally bench Cade McNamara and play Brendan Sullivan as the quarterback.
That's a good segue. Not to step on Nikki's toes here, but Cade McNamara, obviously we know him fairly well after watching him play for Michigan for a couple of years. What seems like I've got a good idea what Joel's opinion is, but what have your guys' thoughts been? I know he got injured last year, but I know the touchdowns, the stats don't look great, but I mean, certainly the running game's helping, but would love to hear your guys' thoughts on Cade McNamara.
To be fair, I don't think they're asking him to do much more than be a game manager. And to that point, he's been okay. Not in the Ohio State game. In the Ohio State game, he turned the ball over 3 times in a row. And I think what's so frustrating is that Ferentz has a very strict rule that if you don't value the ball and don't take care of it, you grab bench, unless you're his chosen one at quarterback. Because the only thing apparently that he hates more than turnovers is a quarterback controversy. And that was frustrating to me because I was like, okay, maybe Brendan Sullivan doesn't have the pedigree that Cade McNamara has, but he played at Northwestern. He won Big Ten games, and he's actually mobile. He can run. He can move around in the pocket, and McNamara just can't now. He's got that weird kind of flingy side throwing motion. Like he just does not inspire a lot of confidence in his physical abilities. I think he's probably and knowing Ferentz, he has huge leadership qualities. His fellow players respect him. He knows the playbook inside and out. But in my world, if you don't value that football and, you're not very mobile, I would like to see them at least get the other guy in for a few more series. They do. And then, of course, first time they put him in, he almost turned it over when I was going in to score on a very ill-advised little half-assed pass that was actually a lateral. So maybe neither one of them takes care of the ball. So maybe that shoots my argument down. But I don't know, Joel. Where are you on the whole K-Mac? He looked better last week.
He looked better, but I still don't like his footwork. I don't like his happy feet. It's the first Power 4 touchdown he's thrown since he threw one against Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. It's the quarterback from Michigan. I just think Sullivan brings more to the table from a mobility standpoint. And I think as you have a developing offensive line, as you have a running back who is in the target of every defensive coordinator you're going to face from this point forward, having a quarterback who can keep the ball and pick up a first down with his legs, I think positions Iowa in a stronger position to play. I do think you're right, though, Tori. I think that this is Cade McNamara's team. He's a tremendous leader from all we've heard from guys inside the room, and there's a lot of credence to that. I kind of said when we took over this podcast together, Tori, is I wouldn't be that annoying talking head and bitch about players all the time and things. And for some reason, Cade he's become the turnover machine that I just hate. And to me, though, his interceptions are no worse than that almost fumble that Sullivan had. So, or just as bad as the almost fumble that Sullivan had. So my Sullivan doghouse is far less crowded than the McNamara doghouse, just because we've seen so much of it. And if Iowa protects the football, they win games.
If Iowa had stellar quarterback play, they would have beaten Iowa State by double digits quite easily.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they lost the game because of Cade McNamara, but I do think that was a huge aspect, especially in the second half of that game. And the Ohio State outcome probably doesn't change, but I do think it's probably a more competitive game. 3 consecutive turnovers took that from 7-3 to 21-3 or something like that, and then the game was over.
Yeah, we know that goes.
Know a thing or two
yeah,
about
we would.
Ending games
none of them are Rocky Lombardi though.
Oh gosh, there we go.
But it is kind of funny because you are. Obviously, Cade McNamara is more of a game manager, which is the opposite of what we have. Someone who we consider to have a little bit too happy feet of just dishing the ball away. But I was thinking, what would you guys think would be kind of your keys to victory for this, for beating Michigan State this weekend?
For me, again, it's running the ball and getting turnovers. I have to be honest. When Iowa's at its best, it takes the ball away, and it's usually one of the best Big Ten teams of that. Michigan State kind of feels to me like they like to give the ball away. We have in the past really struggled with mobile quarterbacks. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. But the problem with Iowa, when you're the opponent, is that they're just not going to make mistakes on defense. They're going to stay in their lanes. They're going to play their assignments. So you're not going to trick them with anything. So if you can, and that's, Washington outgained Iowa. Washington had more time of possession, and Washington got its ass kicked because Iowa is perfectly happy to let you roam around between the 30s and look good. And then once you get down there, they're going to take the ball away or force a field goal, and they might block the field goal. And that's how Iowa ends up winning games. So I guess what I'm most curious about to see from Michigan State is how do you guys feel about your defense? Because I think, the best way to beat Iowa is to get into what Iowa State did, get into one of those phone booth games where somebody comes out and wins, 16-13 or something like that. Is that something Michigan State's capable of?
Well, I don't think you wouldn't know it by watching the last 2 games, but that was also versus Oregon and Ohio State back to back. I think this year the defense has been a pleasant surprise. They've shown to be pretty capable. The defensive line and linebackers, for the most part, being kind of the strong point there. They've done a good job pressuring the quarterback and stopping the run. So I do think that could happen. I'm worried about the running back. I don't think Iowa and Oregon, we've certainly played running backs as talented as Caleb Johnson, but it's going to be interesting to see. Coming off a bye week, I like, guys should be healthy and ready to go, but that'll be a tough test.
We also have Cade McNamara's nemesis and Chuck Brantley, so
that's true.
That'll help.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
He made his name picking off Cade back in 2021.
As a freshman.
Just cut his knees out.
See as Iowa. What do you see as Iowa's
Fighting
keys to
dirty.
victory, Joel?
For Iowa's key to victory is turnover margin and starting field position. The biggest turn in the game against Washington was our new freshman Australian punter Reese Dakin kicked the 67 air yard punt from his own 17-yard line, and we tackled the returner at the 10. So I mean that completely flipped the game. I know it's cliche for Iowans to say punting is winning. For your fan base, I cut my teeth as a special teams coordinator in the coaching profession, and so I'm very in tune with the special teams game. And Iowa does it very well. And if the kicking game is on point and the turnover margin is in Iowa's favor, it's like a boa constrictor. It's they're going to be biting kneecaps, like Dan Campbell says, and nice. Good things are going to happen.
I like the Dan Campbell reference. You're back in my good graces, Joel.
Absolutely.
One of my high school buddies is the head strength coach for the Detroit Lions.
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice.
That's very cool.
He's doing a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have a question. If you're a special teams coach, what were your thoughts on Ross Ells, our old special teams coordinator, one of the worst people on this planet? I don't know if you watched State.
I'll be honest. I didn't analyze your special teams that closely, but based off of your reaction, I'm assuming you're in a better place that he's no longer in the green and white. He's off. Is he off like burning one behind a dumpster with Jeff Smoker somewhere? What's he doing nowadays? Like, what's going on?
I don't know. Okay. That's a good question.
God damn it, Joe! I said I was the funny one, and now you're bringing all the jokes.
Yeah. I don't know how much Michigan State football you guys have watched, but is there a concern you have as you enter this game? Like, oh gosh, that guy's gonna be a problem, or well, we got to stop that, or we got to watch out for that. And Tori, you touched on it a little bit. Asking about the defense, but I'm wondering coming into this game if you guys are worried about anything. Obviously, we're worried about Caleb Johnson. Wondering if you guys have any similar concerns.
Yeah, for me, it's Aiden Childs. I mean, he's an athletic quarterback, and we've seen lots of weirdly athletic quarterbacks have the game of their life against Iowa's defense. I don't know why that is, but I mean, going all the way back to Northwestern quarterbacks running around like chickens with their heads cut off, but chucking them downfield and having good plays happen. So for me, it's Aiden Childs.
Yeah,
that makes me feel a lot better.
3 words, Joel.
At least they're concerned about something.
Steel Jantz. I bet none of you Michigan State guys have ever heard of Steel Jantz, have you?
Nope.
I presume. Yeah, he was some jackass backup quarterback from Iowa State that just came in and destroyed Iowa with his legs. And I say the same thing as Joel. If you get a quarterback that can use his legs and is patient enough to dink and dunk and not try to make big plays and make mistakes, that is kind of the Iowa kryptonite. So that worries me. The fact that it's a night game concerns me a little bit. I don't know. How is your fan base doing these days? Because I feel like there's been a little discontent, but I mean, I always view Michigan State as a difficult place to play, particularly when the Spartans are doing well, and particularly at night. So how much of a factor do you guys think another night game is going to be?
Well, it's homecoming too, which is nice for us.
Yeah.
I think the fan base is very loyal. Tori, like you said, when things are going good, I would say it's a tough place to play. I think there's a lot of excitement and commitment to what Jonathan Smith is doing right now. That I think the fans the team is in a good place with the fans. Coming off a bye week, homecoming, a team that I think our fans think we have a chance in this one. I think it's going to be a pretty good atmosphere in terms of the fans. A lot of excitement, I would say, for the program right now. And coming off a bye, big game. I think a lot of the fans see this as a must-win game too. So I'm expecting a pretty big atmosphere.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of allegiance, and I think weren't expecting to really compete very much in those last two games, so it was kind of par for the course a little bit. But I'd say that if you had asked most of our fan base if they'd sign up for 3-3 at this point, they'd take it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and I mean the crowd at the Ohio State game was extremely loud from the TV, and nobody thought we were going to win that game. So
yeah.
I think it should be pretty loud this week.
And that's what's interesting. I mean, that's another factor that I wonder about is that I kind of felt like after the Ohio State game, and granted, Washington has talent on their team. It's a lot of untested, and they're not really a cohesive team yet. But you could almost sense that the Iowa players like, okay, we don't have to be perfect. You play Ohio State in Columbus, you just can't screw up. Like you have to do everything right. There's that. And so I could kind of see that coming from Michigan State as well, is that, Iowa's again, good, not great team. So it's kind of a good, you guys are right. It's a great measuring stick game. It's funny. My old podcast partner, whose house I'm actually staying at right now, used to always say one of the things Iowa, unfortunately, we excel at is we always get to be like the big bad meanie foe that you overcome in your special season. And it's kind of been the case. Iowa played that in the Water Boy, if you remember that. Remember that was the bowl game for the Mudheads, right?
That's
the
right.
big mean Iowa guys. The
the Mud Dogs.
Big Ten championship game. Michigan State came in so we're always like the second boss, maybe not the big boss, but like in a video game sense, right? And so I could kind of see that be a factor too.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Iowa, I feel like, is always a tough out.
Respected but not feared, right? Respected but not feared.
Yeah. But I know we were looking at the schedule, like we saw Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, Michigan, 4 straight weeks, and it was like that's 4 straight losses. So I think there's a little more optimism now, both from the way Michigan State's played. Iowa certainly has turned it on, though. I was, like I said, I had a double take when I saw 40 points against Washington last week. Kind of a little concerning heading into our game. I'll admit I wasn't expecting that. So I'm in this series, like I was kind of mentioning earlier, I feel like there's always been close games. And if you go back to last year, I think Michigan State was like a penalty or two away. I think there was a special teams touchdown in that game. Obviously the 2015 championship game, Tori, you mentioned quite a bit. Kind of coming down to the last play there, and this series always seems to yield some good, exciting games. Both teams kind of look to do the same thing on offense, establish the run. Both teams like to have strong defenses. So I always get excited when Iowa comes to town, or vice versa, going to Kinnick.
Yeah, it's a fun game to watch every year. There's a lot of memories, especially on the good side and on the bad side. Remember the Ricky Stanzi last second touchdown pass.
I was actually just going to
Chris
say,
L. Rucker. Yeah, that one tore me up big time.
I am an Iowa high school football official, and one of the guys on my crew teaches with Marvin McNutt down in Keokuk.
Yeah.
And I actually just talked to Marvin this morning. I was trying to get him to come on our show tomorrow. He's the head football coach at Keokuk High School, so he can't join us this week because he's busy. But I was just talking to Marvin this morning about that play, and he's basically said that play has kept him from he doesn't really have to pay for a lot of meals now when he goes out anywhere.
Yeah, I almost died at that because I was watching it at this bar, Rookies, and I got up and I got so excited, and I was just high-fiving and yelling at people and been drinking a fair amount, and I literally passed out with just exuberant joy, and then it was crazy. I couldn't breathe. It was wild.
We ran into a huge
the Micah Hyde
on the previous drive too. Yeah, that was nuts.
And then you guys came in to Kinnick once, I think ranked 5th, and we boat raced you. Micah Hyde had Tyler Sesh had the pick lateral to Micah Hyde and the returns for touchdown.
Yeah,
just kind of
we weren't ready for that one. Yeah. That was.
And at least in the D'Antonio days, that as much as I don't like Mark, he and Kirk are very similar in how they built a program. It's build it from the trenches out. We're going to run the football, control the clock. We're going to play strong defense, consistent defense, and make you make mistakes. And I think that's why they recruited a lot of the same players. Going back to the Jaleel Johnson recruiting, which was a pretty heated thing between the coaching staffs. It's one of those fun mini rivalries in the Big Ten that I think most people don't realize.
Exactly. I would second that. Yeah.
I would to kind of piggyback on that. A good friend of our pod is the ex Cedar Rapids Gazette writer Mark Morehouse, and he had such a great way of putting it. And I think this even preceded the Big Ten West, but he basically said Michigan State, Iowa, and Wisconsin we're always like fighting to stay on the same ice flow of who is the next, who's up there with Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State. And it's always one of these programs. And so it just creates that kind of really bloody battles, of who can be the kind of black, like the dark horse candidate to compete with the Big Two and Penn State a little bit. And it's made for some fantastic games and a fun rivalry. But I think, again, a pretty respectful rivalry. I don't think, I don't sense a lot of superiority from one side or the other in the football rivalry. It's kind of a mutual respect, very similar to Iowa, Wisconsin. Like we have we're border states, so it gets a little bit more heated maybe. And they try to say they can drink more beer than us, which frankly they probably can, but it's close. So no, but I think it's fun.
Yeah, it's always nice to have the rivalry that's not look, I love the rivalry with Michigan, but it's nice to have rivalries that are not like toxic and full of hate, where you just want to win. This one is so good because there's at least in my recent memory, there's been heartbreak on both sides, and there's always just seems to be a good game, like we've said. So with that, I think I want to get into some predictions here. Tori, I'll start with you. The spread is 5.5. Iowa's favored. Give me your predicted score and outcome for the weekend.
Yeah, so I think one thing, if I'm a Michigan State fan, that I'm a little concerned about is that some of your kind of weak points kind of match up with what are some Iowa strong points. You have a quarterback that is a little prone to errors and maybe trying to force things, which Iowa feasts on. And then you guys haven't been super stout against the run, and we might have the best running back in the country. I mean, the Boise State kid's awesome too, but I question somewhat who he's played against. So, I think this is going to look kind of like the Washington game, and where it's going to be nip and tuck at first, but I think Iowa forces some turnovers late. And I think the Iowa offense, at least on running the ball, is for real. So I'm thinking it's going to look something like, 31-17, but it's going to be like 13-10 at halftime. I think Iowa might get a couple late turnovers and make it look, it's going to be another game like 40-16 was the final score last week, but that's not how that game was a lot closer than that. I mean, Washington moved the ball great. They did pretty well, just had some critical errors. So that's kind of how I see this one playing out.
I respectfully hope that you're wrong. Respectfully, of course.
You would not be a good fan if you didn't.
Right. Joel, what about you?
I think this is the game Caden Weechin breaks free and gets a punt return for a touchdown, a la Cooper DeJean last year, and completely flips this game in the third quarter with the special teams touchdown. I think this game is going to be like a 34-17. Something in that range. Maybe it's going to be a 31-20, something like that. It's not going to be a 2-touchdown victory. It'll be somewhere in that 11 to 14 points. But I think it's turnovers, and I think the return game for Iowa, which has been so close to breaking some big plays, I think they finally break one this weekend, and that's the difference. Kick return touchdowns.
Oh man, I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's gonna be a heartbreak.
That would be even more concerning for us now. We have enough problems to deal with.
Right. Yeah. Well, Joel and Tori, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Before we go, I want to give you guys a chance to plug your podcast and anything else you may want to plug, where best to find you and everything like that.
You can find us on all of the podcast services: Apple, Spotify, Amazon. You can follow our at 12 Saturdays on X. We have a Facebook page. We're right now an audio only podcast. We're working on the video side. That may be for next year. We get the video thing all figured out. But I want to say one thing. I was at the 2001 Iowa-Michigan State game, which was, post 9/11. It was homecoming from Michigan State. My girlfriend at the time, her brother-in-law was the drum line director for the Michigan State marching band. And that night was one of the greatest nights of my life. I went to the famous chicken place in Lansing with the principal trumpet player from the Boston Symphony who played the Apollo 13 theme for John Williams on the movie score, and Branford Marsalis. That's how I spent my night after Iowa lost to Michigan State in a heartbreaking game in 2001. So I have some fond memories in Lansing, Michigan, drinking Bell's beer underage at this fried chicken place with some of the most famous musicians in the world. So
That's awesome.
I actually, as much as I like to give Michigan State a hard time, it's probably one of my favorite places I've been as I've traveled around the conference.
That's great to hear. And I would love to get to a game at Kinnick. That's certainly on my bucket list. But that's great. You said East Lansing fried chicken. I got goosebumps. Nothing to do with the football,
Anthony Clemens is the one who kind of introduced it to the rest of our fan base. That kid who wasn't good enough to play for the Spartans, but did pretty well for the Hawkeyes.
Yeah. Well, Joel and Tori, thank you again. This has been great. Best of luck this weekend. Obviously, we'll be rooting against you, but look forward to collabing again in the future. Again, really appreciate your time. And to all of our Spartan fans, if you're ever looking for some Iowa Hawkeyes content, definitely give Joel and Tori a listen on the 12 Saturdays podcast.
Yeah, we call it 12 Saturdays, but we cover basketball too throughout the basketball season. So we're not just a football only pod. So lots of maybe Fran McCaffrey will put a dent in the Spartan floor again this year with the champ.
He's
a lot less defense when it comes to basketball, though.
Yeah. We're just one Zach McCabe hip toss away from a great season.
There you go. No, it's been a pleasure, guys. And like I said, East Lansing was my second choice for schools. I was this close to going there, and I always and the fans I met I was at the 2015 Big Ten championship game, and and I'm not just kissing your ass here, but the difference between you guys and the Michigan fan base, night and day. You guys are classy, fun, chillaxed. I almost got in a fight in the elevator after Michigan beat us. A guy's giving me crap somewhere. I'm like, you won and you kicked our ass, so just shut up. So no,
and allegedly
on them. So you guys are all right in my book.
Allegedly, the Wolverines all have syphilis. Allegedly.
Well, Ann Arbor is a horse. That doesn't surprise me. So.
That's right. What a dump. That's right. Well, just made my day, Tori, and I would echo the same thing about the Hawkeye fans. They were great in that exact game too. It was that was a nail biter, and things could have gotten ugly, and it was all the fans I thought were great. So
that was a fun one.
That might have been the best college football game I've ever seen in person. Either team was going to get its butt kicked in the playoff that year because they left it all out on that. I mean, Iowa got steamrolled in the Rose Bowl. You guys got steamrolled in the CFP, and that was the game of the year. So
I agree.
So was it the win?
That was Big Ten football. That was 2015 Big Ten championship.
Yep.
If you want to see Big Ten football, look no further.
So was that the win? The winner got to play Derrick Henry, and the loser got to play Christian McCaffrey. Is that how that shook out?
Yep.
That didn't work out great.
No. To be fair, I think we held Derrick Henry to 75 yards, but Alabama just threw the ball all over us.
Hey, Iowa held Christian McCaffrey to 75 yards on his first run. So
his first run.
Honestly, they were up 7-0 before I got on my seat because of security. So not good.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you again, guys. This was great. Take care.